This is Mark Mulcaster from Fan for Tracks, and you are listening to the Rebel Base Card Podcast. Great pull, kid.
You are hearing that, aren't you?
Turn it off.
I've been counting the orders we've disobeyed so far. Would you like to know how many?
No.
17. 18.
You've seen the show, and like us, you have questions.
Ooh, that was a good one, but try this one on for size.
No question should be left off your list.
Whoa. I got a crazy theory, but hear me out.
But you better have some spares.
Oh, that was one of mine. All right, let's do this instead.
With me, as always, is my friend and Card Squadron winger.
This is Greg Cass, a.k.a. Ion Cannon.
We've recorded at home and across the U.S.
Last summer, we were from the Boston Common. This week, we're in Chicago.
This is day 3 of celebration.
The show has had many names, but the purpose is the same. Let's share some time at the table.
Ding ding, it's time for breakfast.
Welcome to the Breakfast Pack, a Rebel Base Card micro podcast series. Today on Questions and or Breakfast. In this episode, we're asking questions and making comments on the final 3 episodes of Andor Season 2. Wow, it went by in a flash. That premiered on Disney Plus on Tuesday, May 13th, and it's already gone. These are going to cover the episodes 10, 11, 12, Make It Stop, Who Else Knows, and then Jedha, Kyber, Erso. And, of course, with me for the end of this, but it's only really the beginning for us in many, many ways, is my co-host and Card Squadron wingman, Gregory Cass from IonCannon.com. Greg, just seemed like a couple days we talked, but it is kind of a couple days since we've talked.
Woo! I feel like I have been beat up and thrown into a cot to recover at a med center somewhere in the core planets or the Outer Rim. So ding ding, it's breakfast time. With happy sadness, I come to you to talk about the end of Andor. And spoiler for this conversation, just whatever you think about individual episodes, just a stunning achievement in Star Wars. If people follow me on social media, you can know I said this is the best Star Wars since I was born, which technically means Return of the Jedi forward. Although I think I was like 2 months old when Return of the Jedi came out.
Now you're making me feel old there, but you know what? Yeah, Return of the Jedi always sort of sits in that same place for me where, you know, I was a different person by the time. You know, I was a young whippersnapper when, you know, A New Hope came out, and then, you know, I was already a teen when Return of the Jedi came out, and many interests there, so it hit a little different. But it's fun because we've had Light and Magic to kind of look back and see not only, you know, post, you know, obviously they left off in season 1 with Jurassic Park, and then now they're going into, you know, the prequels, which is nice. But, you know, when you kind of go back and see some of the decisions, you know, you can go back and see what they did for Return of the Jedi and things and going, you know, wow, it was all just great. And, you know, it's funny as I've been kind of prepping for London Film and Comic-Con where there'll be some Doctor Who guests. I'm like, you know what? We always kind of talk about like the dark times, right? And this is where, you know, you kind of not only grow up, but you discover the books, right? So Timothy Zahn kind of releases Heir to the Empire, which is a great watershed moment. And then, of course, you get Shadows of the Empire. And, of course, as Light and Magic are going, you know, they're doing the special editions and so forth. But Doctor Who has a special place because it started in the 80s for me when my sister kind of got me into it. So you see Baker go into Peter Davison, go into Colin Baker, and that whole issue of them trying, you know, the BBC trying to kill off Doctor Who and then kind of having them bring it back grudgingly but not. And so, you know, when I'm sitting there thinking about, like, you know, we always talk about autographs and who we go up to and the conversations you have. And although I would say that Colin Baker, who's going to be at LFCC, he's not one of my absolute favorites, but he really was there for me when I was, you know, as I was getting older in my teens. And Doctor Who, in many ways, replaced Star Wars because it was done. It was over. And so here was a week-to-week series, and the stories got a little, you know, Colin Baker's tenure is a little darker. Peter Davison even was a little, you know, they were exploring things. And there were some episodes, you know, in that run in those 80s that they were pretty heavy. You know, if you ever think of Earthshock, you know, with the Cybermen and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, they were really trying things. And if you think about, like, as we talk about with The Last Jedi and taking these swings and whether they land or not, it's interesting now going back and revisiting Light and Magic. But, yeah, so it's going to be kind of fun to say, you know what, I might have 30 seconds or a minute in front of Colin Baker and go, you know what, you got me over the hump. You were there, and you filled such a great role. And these folks that really pour their heart and soul into this stuff, and for our entertainment, right? We can sit back there. I can write my reviews. We can do our podcasts. But these people, this is their careers. This is their livelihood. And this is what they're known for. And so, but if you haven't had a chance now that Andor's done, go watch Light and Magic Season 2. It is amazing, and it's going to be fun. We'll be talking about it. Hopefully we'll pull in some guests for that, and we'll be doing some other things with Andor. It's the end, but it's really the beginning. As I put in my Fantha review, Andor is over. Long live Andor. That's how I'm going to say. But at any rate, if you're joining us for the first time on the Breakfast Pack or all their iterations, this is an insert podcast in the regular feed where Greg and I are going to trade questions and comments on this episode, on this arc of Disney plus Star Wars TV. So if you haven't seen the complete Andor arc, there will be spoilers in here for you. Although if you've seen Rogue One, you kind of know where it goes. But there was some questions and things like that they kind of had to fill in. So if you haven't had a chance to see 10, 11, and 12, go back, watch them. They're amazing. And then come back and listen. We'd be glad if you did. So anyway, I would say, I think, as we've kind of gone along, Greg, these shows beg opening statements. Can you, before we kind of dive into some of our questions and comments and things like that, how did you kind of prepare for the last one? You knew what was going to happen, maybe, but did you? Were you ready? As a lot of times we get told, like, are you ready?
Yeah, so just in my personal life, my work semester ends with commencement, which was the Saturday before these, and then we have a 2-day faculty retreat, which I'm going to sound like the laziest person ever when I tell you it kills me because I have to work from 9 to 5. Can you imagine such a thing?
I mean,
and actually putting in like 2 full days of work is surprisingly exhausting for a spoiled, soft professor like myself. So, so this came on the night after the first of those 2 days. So I worked a huge amount, and I was tired, and it was like, well, I have to be ready to go in the morning, but there was no way I was going to risk social media spoiling this or anything like that. So I had done the Sunday grocery shopping, and I had, for a little treat for myself, initiated gin and tonic season, which is how I spend my summer. So I bought some limes, some gin, and some tonic, and I prepared myself a beautiful gin and tonic and tucked right in at 9 o'clock, said goodnight to my kids and wife, and said, this is it. I'm going in. I'll see you on the other side. And had just a wonderful night sitting there sipping my drink and watching these 3. I will say, very unexpected. Maybe the last half of the third was kind of where I thought that we would get to, that kind of final montage on our way to Rogue One. But I was very surprised with the moves they made, but completely delighted. And from the get-go, it was just on, and it didn't stop. And I wrapped it up right about midnight. I rolled immediately into Rogue One, because how could you not hit yes, I would love to watch Rogue One now, especially after the big music cue in the final credits for Andor. I rolled right into Rogue One, watched the majority of Rogue One, didn't quite finish, and then went to bed and had my long day of meetings. But I've seen it said already that kind of Andor, Rogue One, A New Hope, it all just slides together so beautifully. It's a great trilogy and really worth it. So I'm pleased as punch. I could not have asked for a more satisfying second season to the show, and so on. And we'll get into Pringles cans later. How did you consume it? When did you consume it? Have you watched it yet? Is that your first question? What happened? Because I didn't watch it yet.
I think, like over the last couple of weeks, and we've talked about it, and I think I had been wrestling with the show, how it was, the release schedule. And so after the first week of trying to take it all in and really the struggle of, the next 2 weeks I did the one, and there's a natural break because I have to go pick up the wife from work. And then decidedly the middle 2 arcs, I actually would do the second one after, and then I would wait until the morning, and then I would watch the third one. And I think that helped, especially with things like Gorman and so forth. But in this one, I was like, yes, I was really concerned that, especially being the finale, or, like somewhere along the line, we're going to see stuff that's going to be out there. And I'd rather, especially if you're doing this kind of stuff, you're always kind of having to check the socials. And so I'm like, you know what, I'll just power through and watch it. And I would say that the first 2 episodes did a really good job of maintaining that pace. If you think about it, after Gorman, I mean, that's a heck of a penultimate arc. And you kind of figured that, there were going to be some pieces that were left that they have to kind of move on. Where it's going to end up. What I still loved about this was there was going to be some fallout, but there were still some things thrown in like I don't think anyone would have predicted, which was great. But I do know that this arc specifically, right? So far, so good. And if you read, like I banged out my review for Fantatrax while I was on a quick back and forth trip to California, but it was going to have to, the final arc was going to have to both service the series, or the season, the series, and Andor, and that is a tall order. And I think up until this point, I think doing the arcs as a year. Why am my hand? I'm doing the hand thing again, where a hand is just moving. I'm just talking with my hands. Was going pretty good. I was really on board. We talked about the time in between the gaps and things. This is one where I think it was a tall order, and there was a decision made, as we'll get into in talking about this, that I do think shorted some things. And it's always interesting because anytime you see like these prestige series, the finales are always up against history. Everything from the famously things like Lost, or like Game of Thrones, or Sopranos. All these ones, or even for that matter, the bizarre White Lotus. It's so bizarre, but so you're more worried in some cases about, are they going to stick the landing? In this case, we kind of know where it's going to land, but how are they going to pull it off? And so I do feel that in the third arc, we look back now, having had them all spit out so fast, that boy, there was no money left. Could we have had, and afterwards you kind of have to ask, you start asking yourselves, like, gosh, are we so hung up on trilogies and arcs that we can't go, you know what? All that stuff you cut, you could have made a couple of more episodes. I think it would have really, in some cases, helped some things. But as much as I can be nitpicky on that, I would say overall, this series really took Star Wars in some places. It really cranked it to 11, outdoing really itself in season 1. And so as much as I will say, like, I wish it did this, this, and this, I was incredibly satisfied overall with the series. It's interesting as we get to our Pringles cans review, which we will do after the end, and I'll shout out to a friend of mine. We kind of came up with a great way of somehow getting to a Pringles can review that actually, I think that actually is exactly how I should present it. So, but you'll have to stay to the end. But anyway, but that's my, you'll hear me probably talk about it throughout. And even as I put my review in, I was like, man, I didn't think I would be like this. I mean, it's amazing where, don't you just love, Greg, when you get challenged and you really have to stop and think about everything? I mean, that's what a good show does.
I completely agree. And, my dear friend Carl from Wampus Lair and I have a difference of opinion sometimes that leads us into different areas where, for him, completely valid, Star Wars is about nostalgia and about kind of leaning into comfort and knowing, getting to play a little bit more. And I think that's entirely valid. But for me, I need art that challenges me, that shoves me around, that beats me up a little and gets me to think in new ways. And I respect anybody, Carl or otherwise, that doesn't feel that way. But that's where I am, right? I'm the one watching all the Oscar nominated documentaries in a theater by myself, like seeing the worst of humanity on my Tuesday night. And I do think Andor is for those who like to get a little beat up. I mean, it really challenges you. It really makes you think about what's going on in our world, in this world. It drains all the fun out of A New Hope in certain ways. Like you thought this was a fun escapist, fantasy. It's like these are the worst fascists in the galaxy, and we're gonna start fighting back. And it's kind of beautiful and it's wonderful. And I will forever remember this series as, for me, the absolute best Star Wars I've ever seen. But I respect those who say this doesn't quite feel like Star Wars to me. I like my Star Wars a little different. I respect it. I don't agree with it, but that doesn't mean we can't still hold hands and skip merrily into the celebration stage at the next celebration.
I think when you go back and you look at the pre-Mandalorian days as Disney Plus was kind of opening their tent and not really knowing how Star Wars TV was going to go. And you think about how the first season of Mandalorian really felt like Star Wars that was made for TV, right? It had great situations. It looked great. Some episodes were a little shorter, but you really felt that. And then you go, what we've kind of found with Disney Plus Star Wars is, and we got that a little bit with Rogue One and Solo, is like it can go into places, right? And I think also it's kind of interesting that you can have an entire High Republic series that appeases a certain amount of fans and others who I don't think anyone's out there saying, like, I don't like the High Republic. They'll just go, I just don't read it. Or they'll say, like, I tried or I hate getting around to it. But you don't really, and I think it's the same with whether it's comics or books or some, like you said before, famous is like, what, the animated stuff sometimes just, I'll watch it, I'll like it, but it doesn't click on me. And I think that, you need series like Andor, just like I think you need series like The Acolyte and Ahsoka and all those. Book of Boba Fett, and we've talked about endlessly about, there's some things that hit and things that doesn't. Going back and watching Light and Magic, when it was all George Lucas and a highlighter, and everybody back are going, I wonder what he's going to like and what he was not going to like. It's a different kind of Star Wars now. And what I don't necessarily want is playing the hits. There are now as many different groups, and they understand that, it's tricky to appeal to a mass audience. Some things will hit. Your daughter's going to grow up going, Young Jedi, that was the stuff. For me, I'm like, things are going to, like, Clone Wars hits with people. Phantom Menace, especially going back and watching as Light and Magic Season 2 talks about the Phantom Menace and all that, how a generation, that's their jam. And for us, it was like, okay, but as it goes along, you go, man, it's all, we talked about pizza. There you go. Jen, there's your bingo card. It's all pizza. And I may not go to Domino's, but I'm like, I'd certainly, if you put a Domino's pizza in front of me, I'll eat the Domino's pizza. I'm telling you, I'm not ashamed, but it's all good. But it's always tricky with last episodes, last arcs, because the questions, they blur the line between questions and comments. But I'm kind of curious where you want to go first in this episode, because there's a lot to talk about.
Yes, and I just to reiterate what you just said, I have some that are very specific about what do you think about these moments, these episodes.
Totally
But I
valid.
also have a lot of kind of like, senior yearbook questions. Like here we are at the end, and this is all the Andor we get. So what do we scribble down in the books to remember it? So I'll go specific first. And so to me the big surprise of the night was episode 9, Make It Stop. Was, I believe, the first Cassian-free episode of the show Andor, which was a surprise. And I think people can debate whether that was the right choice or the wrong choice, but I don't think anybody will debate it was a surprise. So I found it very compelling and interesting. I want to unpack Luthen. This guy who's been a mystery. We get a little backstory on him, which I had only seen that afternoon. Tony Gilroy had said in the press that we would get Luthen backstory in season 2, which surprised me. Like, well, we just snuck it in right under the wire. So first of all, did you like learning more about Luthen? Then to the more specific realm of what conflict do you think he was in? How old is he? Like, how does this fit into our Star Wars timeline? It's a little bit of a general reaction to the choice, but also, who do you think this taught us? What? Let me say it a different way. What do you think this taught us about Luthen, and who do you think Luthen is after seeing this?
I am not sure. This was a tough one to start with because this is probably what I had. Some of the I think ended up being some of the root cause of some of the things I was a little disappointed with. And first off, I really liked that they've had such a long relationship, and you found out about Clea's backstory. But I think it opens up because it seems to be a very generic conflict. Because for us, we're looking like, oh, is this Separatist Republic thing? Which, it almost kind of tracks that it might be. But it seems very violent and seems very like, all right, they're doing a sweep and they're taking people out. But I do find, at least in the beginning, that I think I was a bit distracted because I was looking for more of those ties too. I think my Star Wars brain, is going to try to put pieces together, and it just wasn't going to give me. Even to the last sequence where you're going, and this you kind of stole one of the questions already. It's like, this is Naboo, isn't it? It looks like Naboo. It really looks like Naboo. Is this Naboo? And then boom, and you're like, okay, I guess we're not on there anymore. But and also when you see the stormtroopers and you go, wait a minute, and you're starting to do math like, how old is he? Because it's funny. It's like the longer we go, the shorter the Empire's reign really seems. And you're going, wait a minute, how old? So I think that overall, it was interesting. Yet I think you will find several schools of thought of how they deal with flashbacks, and usually that road has a shortcut exit to Acolyte. So it has a rough go in the Star Wars universe, but I do think that overall it was interesting. But I do think we lost a lot of Mon Mothma in it. I think that was a direct result, and I was more interested really in Mon Mothma's transition from senator on the run to rebel leader, as we have been given this parallel story of her sacrifice and what I thought was going to be maybe the family sacrifice. But I think that it took the place of some things that could have been done. And as you'll get to, especially with Clea, I don't think I was as satisfied with it, although it's give me more of anything. I think that could have been a book. I think it would have been a great book. But I don't know if it served here. I don't know why I don't think it did what it was set out to do. It definitely told a backstory. We got a lot of backstory. But I don't know if it accomplished the mission. What about yourself?
Yeah, you gave me a lot to mull over there, and I'm
He's like,
pondering
but I liked
it
it.
as
Like,
I formulate my response. So, it is really interesting. So I think of Tony Gilroy sitting down with his action figures, not literally, metaphorical action figures, and he had a lot that he invented to play with. And we've talked about this so many times. I think this series, he brags, has 200 named characters. That's insanity. And, you feel it at times. And I think, you think about the two kids shout out to my cousin Miles, who I don't think listens to my podcast, but my cousin Miles, he was just talking to me on Instagram because I posted the new comic variants started coming out, the action figure variants. So they reached the power of the Force from the 90s. And my cousin Miles immediately commented on my post about it and said, can I borrow that? And it was a great joke because he used to borrow my action figures and he would invite me over and we'd bust open the big trunk. The great ritual we did when we bust open the giant trunk of Star Wars action figures is the picking of the sides. You lay out all the figures and you're like, okay, you go first, then I get one. Then you go first and I get one. Luthen feels like the action figure you pick out, right? The one you grab first. Even though it's called Andor, even though Mon Mothma is incredible, Luthen is just like the great kind of Boba Fett level character that's like, I want to play with him. I want to know what's there. So it was really surprising to fill in a little bit more of this. It is impossible to learn anything about Luthen and not think about his speech from season 1, right? I have made my soul a sunless space. And I think what we're realizing in these flashbacks is that has meant Clea, which I never put Clea into that conversation. But Clea could have been his daughter in the very real, warm, filial way. And instead, Clea was his agent. He was her handler more than he was her father, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you're my father now? It's like when it's convenient, right? And I think that relationship was so compelling to me that I was more forgiving of these flashbacks. So number one, I'm going with a small planetary conflict. I don't think we can say, oh,
That's
it's a
fair.
Clone Wars battle, it's Minbin. We have to remember that the process of the Empire becoming the Empire led to all these conflicts with planets not wanting to sign on.
Right.
And about 20 years old feels like you're saying a little too soon for it to be necessarily Empire. It feels very Vietnam coded to me, and rightly or wrongly, a lot of servicemen who fought in Vietnam, tried to build a family out of who they found there, and that's kind of what Luthen is doing in these flashbacks. I also was waiting for confirmation without a doubt that it was Naboo, and it seems like it is. If you caught the StarWars.com trivia guide, they pointed out there's a deleted scene from Phantom Menace where the submarine, the Bongo, comes out from Oda Gunga and is parked in the film in its current form. You see them come above ground, the shield goes down, and they get out. In the deleted scene, they're near a waterfall, and there's this little action sequence of the Bongo almost going over the waterfall, and Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan have to escape.
Right.
That was filmed at that same bridge. So
Okay.
so it seems that like it's safe to say this is Naboo. This is where we are. So I'll go with it. And I do like this way in which we get like we don't get the Clea series, and I like your point that it could have been a book. We get, like, in case you were wondering, Clea went through the same life Cassian did, right? It was different. It was handled a little differently, but that's who she is. One of the podcasts I listened to pointed out she, like, slowly gets her Count Dracula hair as the flashbacks go on, and it's really wonderful and well done. So I'll save my thoughts on the present day Clea plot, but I will say this was the most surprising move. I'm probably more positive than you are. And I will say on Long Take Review, we often, when we talk about favorites, we also talk about the deltas, which is who so surpassed expectations. For me in season 2, that's Clea. I wasn't expecting literally anything from her. I kind of forgot she was in season 1, and I thought she was incredible this season. Maybe not my favorite character this season, but the largest change, the largest delta from what I expected of her and where she got to.
Yeah, and I do think that boy does she really have great moments in the first 2. And like I said, I think picking up that, not only her mission to go to unfortunately, take Luthen off the table for the ISB,
Beautiful.
but also her rescue by Cassian that kind of goes over the next episode. Who else knows? And a little bit into the last episode was, I think it was really done well. And that's like I said, the only thing that I felt was that I really felt that there had been a very strong relationship between the two. That I didn't necessarily feel that, although like I said, it really makes a lot of sense in their story arc wise of how close they are. But I really felt that they had a really tight relationship. I didn't need it to kind of be proven again. But once again, it's always kind of interesting. It's almost like, like when you see the Mando backstory. And here's something else, right? So let's take this. Go back to Mando season 1 when when the armorer is casting his pauldron, and you see those shots of his family. But you also get in that where it's very brief, but then you do see, like, you see Death Watch and you see the battle droids and things like that, where you're not really asking those questions. You don't get anything more, right? Bernard Boulin does not get any dialogue. The mom and dad don't get any dialogue. Neither does the kid. But it was pretty clear. I mean, and let's go even further with Grogu's backstory, when that parallel one where you get that amazing shot of Keller and Beck and hello, and the Jedi and the temple and all that. I mean, that's interesting, but I think a little more clarity, I think, would have been great. But then again, I mean, yeah, the two work in the shadows, so more questions than answers. It tracks as far as that's concerned. But at any rate, but yeah, it's just and great. You, like I said, taking that. I was really I like the fact that maybe if it looks to me like it was Naboo, it probably was Naboo, and I like that callback. I'm like, that's kind of cool, because in the reptile brain, you kind of there's a satisfying string that goes those two, and wow, terrorist activity on Naboo. Wow, this is really getting real. But it also, you get to go back to Naboo for a bit, and after having gone through Revenge of the Sith and finishing up, all these prequels that are getting their flowers now. That was really nice to kind of see that. I think that would have pacified some of the nerds like me had they gone even further. Like, all right, we're gonna spell it out to you, fool, and then go from there. All right. One of the things that I felt in this arc that was done incredibly well was Dedra Miro and the ISB, and what I like to say was the slow death march that Ben Mendelsohn, as director Krennic, put out. When you kind of see, how it's kind of going down, did you feel like, I felt like that Dedra was going to be the scapegoat? Can you tell me that you saw or you didn't see the unraveling of Partagaz go down the way it did? That to me, many flowers for Dedra, and there's plenty of space in this podcast to talk about that. But that was something that I always like to kind of, I don't like seeing people like off themselves. Let me just put it that way. But I'm just saying that in seeing him unravel like that, and of course leading up to, I'm going to let you say it, listening to him, you had to just, I felt, I could feel you through these many miles from Boston to Chicago. I felt you had to be coming through the TV when all that was going down. How did you feel? And did you see that coming?
I did not see that coming at all, and I absolutely loved it. So I managed to get my rewatch in today, and I realized I had kind of missed a really smart little moment that preceded it that I'll talk about in a moment. But just taking your comment as the opportunity to say everything that happens with Miro and the ISB is absolutely astounding, right? And so what has been beautiful about this whole process is we look at A New Hope and we get rebel spies working from their secret base have stolen plans. Then we get Rogue One that explains that. And then we have Cassian at the start of Rogue One who knows, I need to go find Galen Erso and talk about the Death Star project. And now we trace that backwards and backwards and backwards. And we realize now that all of that comes back to Dedra Miro getting obsessed with the Star Path unit in the first episode of this show, and that choice Cassian made to steal that Star Path starts her spinning out, leading to this terrible raid, which Lonnie saw her spying, which then he feeds to Luthen, and then it escalates on and on. Brilliant. And the absolute final moment of Dedra Miro on this show being her sitting in, I believe it's confirmed to be Narkina 2, or it's a different Narkina, but brilliant. I mean, I'm just flabbergasted. I didn't see it coming. I thought it was really wonderful. So the moment that I referenced is also just, I mean, I can't praise the writing on this show enough. I'm so sorry to say this, but I think Star Wars fans have been trained to care only about plot and not care about good writing. This show has demonstrated that good writing matters. Krennic gets one line. He says, "I'm sorry, Leo, I can't protect you this time."
Yes.
And it's so good because it tells you everything you need to know. It is that these two came up together. They're buddies. He would save his friend. Yes, he's like deadly ambitious, but he would save his friend if he could. And we know from that moment that Partagast is doomed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Partagast doesn't seem like the type who would suddenly be swayed to off himself, but does seem like the type who knows when the die is
Yep.
cast and you are going to lose on your terms. And his terms are, I'm not going to Narkina 3. I'm not going. That ain't gonna be me. I'm going to do it my way. And of course, we don't endorse self-harm or anything like that. It's a fictional character.
Yes.
We can talk about this. But if your choice is spend an endless time putting together widgets to go on the Death Star, go out on your own terms. Now, the return of gotta just say it, Nemec. I'm staring, Greg, at my Nemec Auto Tops card every time we record about this show. The return of Nemec and the fact that we learn Nemec's manifesto has been a thorn in the side of the ISB. It's been circulating. Brilliant. Now, it wasn't as good as when it shows up in the season 1 finale. I'm not going to pretend that. But the fact that we know that at the end, the last words Partagast chose to hear was knowing that it was inevitable he was going to lose. Like, rebellions are built on Nemec's manifesto, man. That's just how it is. It was stunning. It was brilliant. Shout out to Krennic in these episodes is unbelievable. I have not stopped thinking about him putting his finger on Deirdre's head. And then you learn that that was a Mendo special. That was an improvisation. That wasn't scripted.
Wow.
He just had the idea. And she rolled with it and delivered the rest of the scene looking freaked out and horrified. Director Bennick expressed it to me in emotions with the downward pointed hand and the blonde lady. It was brilliant and it's iconic. And like, look, Director Krennic, the character coming back to these, could have felt schlocky and terrible. Marvel has done this poorly more times than I can count. This was beautiful. Wonderful. And I think that's a credit to good writing and to Ben Mendelsohn as a great performer. So I did not buy Director Krennic's stock when Rogue One came out like my buddy Ben did, but that stock is paying high dividends now. So I don't know that I answered any questions, but I gushed. So would you like the chance to gush a little too?
No, and I think that when we saw that all these returning characters, right, from Director Krennic to Saw Gerrera to K2SO, like I said, tons of this stuff to unpack, and thank goodness we'll be doing Second Breakfast or 11Z's this summer because it's just going to be a blast to revisit this. But I would say that you could tell Ben Mendelsohn was back for a victory lap because he just chewed up scenery. But I'm like, yes, this is what good writing will do. And these little monologues, and like it's just one of those things where it just really, you can see the tension, right? And I think Partagaz's name, Leo, I think that was the first time we'd ever heard it or he was even mentioned. But also when you see the raid and you see Partagaz is really concerned, like they're trying to call in help as K2 is just going through and offing these guys. It really, there's a payoff here. And then, his exchange with the agent, when he's saying like, have you heard it? And it's just like, this is a defeated person who was so brilliant, like through the whole series and really kind of manipulating things. And you're just seeing it's all on him now, even when they're going back, like as he's kind of like trying to like quarterback this raid. And it feels like there are way less ISB agents that are like monitoring, and it'd be really curious to see what the ISB would be like post A New Hope, because obviously Colonel Yularen was on the Death Star, so hello, a good chunk of the ISB. I guess if you're some of the folks from the first season, you're like, oh, that would be an interesting little book of the power play of the return of. But yes, I think that whole arc was done very well, and I think it's punctuated at the end, and I forget the officer's name, the agent's name, when they're standing outside and you hear the blast and his hand kind of goes up to stop the stormtroopers. That is writing that's not almost like it's like not dialogue, but it's good writing where it's like it's so subtle, You don't have to do anything else, but so little did so much. And that's, like I said, it kind of goes back to when you're talking about how valuable the real estate is in this arc. Chef's kiss. This was a satisfactory X times. Let's talk about the 18-10 Pringles can ratio on this one alone. This one gets you a lot of good grades in my book.
Absolutely, and I've heard people noting. I said of the Aldani arc, that was the first time TIE fighters were terrifying, right? When they would swoop in the noise. I've heard a lot of people making the point that Gorman, that was the first time stormtroopers felt really, really scary. And I would say this was the first time Krennic felt scary. I like him in Rogue One. I don't love him in Rogue One, but he felt really scary at every moment he was on screen. The way they shot him, these episodes were directed with a more artistic eye. Luthen walking down the stairs at the beginning of the first one was an incredibly beautiful shot. And then Krennic entering Miro's interrogation room, and it's cut off, so you only watch his mouth. You don't get to see his eyes. And it kind of makes you remember that she's not seeing him and so on. It's like weird choice, but like perfect choice. It's one of those things that like a real good director can do and make you feel so much. So just wonderful. So I will say I'll move on, and again I'm gonna gush plenty. So I'll move on into my sourest. No, I'm gonna go the opposite way. I'm gonna move on to my sourest note in this, which is my question to you: are you disappointed in the amount of K2 and the amount of Melshi we ended up getting in this series? Because when I left season 1, I was like, we're being promised lots of K2, lots of Melshi. They don't show up until this arc, and then they sit out one of the 3 entirely and aren't incredibly active in the third either. So how did you feel about those 2 returning characters among the others?
That's very interesting, and I may actually be on the opposite side of you, because I think not seeing him in all of season 1 kind of prepped me for what little we did get. I would say we did get a little. I think even Gilroy has said, that's the thing. There are these little snippets and screenshots that are being shared all over social media, and you see them in your reels. And I know I have to go back. There's a lot of this I have to go back to, and I think that I think I did hear something about him saying that it was difficult to use because he is such a big weapon, right? He can take so much that I think you would probably have to be careful about what. It's like bringing Superman in, right? And I'm like, well, they're not going to bring him. We know it takes a lot to bring him down. And of course, he completely turned that rescue upside down. I do like him being brought into the Gorman one. I like that. And I guess later on we find out he's the one that's staring at Cyril, which I like, okay, there's a little bit of K2 pre-K2. But yeah, I think I was kind of ready for it. And I think that I was probably more disappointed in seeing less Saw in this arc. Although once again, a lot of this goes back to what are they trying to serve, the series or Rogue One? This continuing battle with, I think once again, this last arc could have been a whole series on its own. It could have been a whole season 3. And I think everybody would have lost their minds. You could have still given. I mean, can you imagine Gorman being the end of the season and then having a whole series on this where you could have done everything? And I mean, like, what, someone backed the money truck up. But I would say that having him come in this way, I think it misses a little bit, because I think when you see in Rogue One, they work so well together. It seemed like they've been around for a long time. I think Tudyk and Diego Luna, boy, they could have really just gone to town. But we only got this. I loved the card table scene, and
Dominoes,
I thought
more
the
than
dominoes,
cards,
yeah,
I think, yeah, but yeah, great scene.
absolutely great scene. Everything he's in, he kills. Once again, Melshi was also kind of a gift. I was like, oh, that's really kind of like in season 1. And so it would have been interesting. I think another thing we kind of miss is the fact that, like in the end, when all the rebels join Cassian to join Jyn Erso, that also could have been something where we could have seen maybe Melshi and this vagabond group of rebels do these things where they're sent in. I mean, once again, like, yeah, there's a whole lot here we could have seen, and you already had them. But I get it, anything with like Saw and stuff, or even K2, that's expensive. More Skulden and Perrin, not so expensive. But anyway, but yeah, I can see it. But it was one of those where I kind of had resigned myself maybe to go, I probably won't get a lot, and I'm okay. But boy, what we got was amazing. How do you feel about this?
Well, I'm going to allude back to you talked about myself being a child of the dark times of Star Wars. And a pure example of that is my unabashed love for Wedge Antilles. So Wedge Antilles is in all three of the original trilogy movies, and they say his name and he speaks in all of them. But like, if you're just a guy going or lady going to the Star Wars films, you don't walk out being like, man, that Wedge Antilles, that's my guy. But Children of the Dark Times got a book series called the Rogue Squadron books that was built around Wedge Antilles, and he is one of my favorite characters of all time because I felt so attached to him. I would put Melshi very much in that category, which is like, and also Brasso in a very similar way. It's like, these guys don't get a lot, but they seem like awesome guys, and I really loved Melshi coming out of Rogue One, right? I like that he's there in the beginning going, Liana Halleck! And I like that he's the one that Cassian calms and says, light it up, and then he starts the battle all the way down to the Master Switch. So I left Rogue One loving Melshi. Loved when he showed up on Narkina 5. That was like a fist pump in the air moment. And then he disappears for a while. And I think if you were, and this is where I'd give the show a lot of credit. If you were being crass and just wanted to make a lot of money off a Rogue One prequel story, you would have K2 every week. You would have Melshi every week. You would have little Jyn Erso running around these Saw Gerrera camps, right? Like, there's no reason. But they had such a subtle hand with those, and I think they knew that we wanted it all. Why not just give us just a taste, just a little bit about it? And the beauty of the 1 year at a time structure, although it is frustrating, is that there's room for comics, there's room for novels. And so as a child of the dark times, I'll take all of it, right?
Yeah, that's true.
I'm going to bust out Catalyst in a few minutes, which is the Rogue One prequel book, which, just lets you soak in this world a little longer. And it's what I crave as a Star Wars fan. So I think it was supremely surprising, and that goes all the way back to Kathleen Kennedy introducing this at a stockholders meeting with Alan Tudyk and Diego Luna on stage. It's like, clearly Alan Tudyk got an unfortunate email at some point that was like, sorry, pal, like, we're going to go fishing next weekend. And, yet when you saw him at Celebration, he's clearly just grateful to be a part of it at all, and they clearly had a great time doing what they were doing. So I think it was surprising, but I think in the end it's fine. I loved so much of this series. Flashback to the opening night of Andor. I didn't know Mon Mothma was going to be here and become one of my favorite characters. I didn't know about all these other places that Tony Gilroy wanted to take us. And yet, I did eventually get right up to those steps of going to meet Tevik at the start of Rogue One. And so I'm totally satisfied. I'm totally fine with it. It's good to not give us exactly what we want, right? Isn't that what we learn as consumers? You give us exactly what we want and we eat 10 Big Macs a day, right? So you got to slow us down and give us the vegetables sometimes too.
All right, well, that's a great transition into my question. And I think one of the main sticking points for me is that, do you feel Mon's transition, or do you feel Mon's character is complete enough in this arc that additional scenes, right? Because I kind of had expected, and maybe that's part of the expectations, that there would be some fallout, and with Perrin and with Vel, with Skulden getting a little more screen time in the one arc where he's challenging things. You kind of felt, but I wasn't sure if I I was sure I wanted to see more of Mon Mothma. How do you feel about her in this arc, and do you feel she's in the place she needs to be?
I will always take more Mon Mothma, especially when Tony Gilroy is writing her. Stay back, Dave Filoni.
Oof,
Don't forget. Through 2 episodes ago, I warned you, cowboy hat. I warned you. Like Jen sent me a very kind text message that was like, "Greg, you should probably chill out a little bit. It's a little much," which would be on my business card. Greg Cast, podcaster. It's a little much. But I will say, I would always take more Mon Mothma. I think it ends up being a huge apotheosis to have her in the Senate giving that speech. And that speech is an all-timer for me. Mm-hmm. It is absolutely one of the best Star Wars moments for me. So I'm satisfied that I saw her end that relationship in the Senate. And then we could get some great filler material to help us get from here to the speech at the start of Return of the Jedi, or kind of the middle of Return of the Jedi. I was just reminded by the internet, I think it was Fantha Tracks, but I might be wrong. Carolyn Blackistone, who played Mon Mothma in 1983, still alive, still working as an actress, 93. God bless her. I will always remember she gave an interview to Rebel Force Radio a really long time ago. It was her and it was another general sitting there. I think it was General Madine, the actor. And she was explaining how she had just learned that the moon is round like a ball, not flat like a plate. It blew my mind that this wonderful moon mother hippie woman was just learning about the world, but was our Mon Mothma. So I would take more Mon Mothma. It's a little dissatisfying, but the thing that saves it for me is Mon Mothma and Vel, who Vel is a low-key MVP of this arc for me, sitting together and just kind of in it. And, you know, what I loved about that moment is, to your point, Mon Mothma gave up everything. She gave up Perrin. Perrin's off with his in-laws, just drinking and cavorting. And she gave up her daughter, right? That was the key moment in season 1. She wrote off her daughter. And we saw the results of that at the wedding arc. And when we think Mon Mothma gave up everything, she gained her niece, right? She gained that relationship, and they are still together. I think getting just the little hint about how hard it is to manage this rebellion told you what Mon Mothma's been up to for this year. I would take a whole season arc of that. I would love to see those council scenes where they're trying to control Saw Gerrera. Shout out to them for getting Senator Pamlo back and the other bearded guy. They keep referring to the Dodonna and Draven are off planet, so clearly they couldn't get those guys back. But it all would have been a great season of television, but I'll take it. And, you know, a lot of times on like your classic HBO streamer, your 9th episode is way better than your 10th episode. And to me, that's a little bit of what happened with Mon Mothma specifically. The penultimate arc is way better than the final arc. And that's okay, because those episodes are all together on Disney Plus now, and will be playing endlessly in my house until I die.
Living rent free, yes. And I do agree. I think the quibbling that that I'm doing is no means saying that the series was a disappointment. The series was amazing. I think it ended a lot better than a lot of others. I would counter with this, and if I had Gilroy's ear. For 1 second before he'd say, scram, nerd. You get one of those like little, Uncle Baby Billy memes where it's like, go on, get. That'd be what he'd tell me. But if you took the last scene between Vel and Clea, kept the exact same dialogue, and put Mon Mothma there, I would have been satisfied that I got enough of how Mon has had to go from being in such a different role, because I do love that in some of the little vignettes where you see Mon and Vel together, right, where we kind of expected most of these people to be gone, right? I mean, Rogue One, it's like, well, that's kind of the roadmap, right? You're going to kill everybody else off. But I think if Mon had been talking to Clea, because Clea's post-rescue was a complete head scratcher for me, where they're trying to build up and they are tearing Cassian apart. This council, you're like, oh yeah, I forgot how frustrating those scenes in Rogue One were when they didn't believe Jyn Erso. And you're like, oh great, I want to see that again, because that's nothing I love more than my heroes being told that no, you're lying, bad information. I'm like, she's 2 doors down in the infirmary, man. She's a primary source right there. Come on, guys. There's nothing more. And by the way, no one said anything about Jyn Erso in this entire series. Come on. It's teed up, man. It's right on that. You got a home run just going for it. But that's the only thing I felt like, yes, I could take Genevieve O'Reilly, and now it's kind of fun going back, because I think when we're in the moment we've been doing over this last 4 or 5 weeks going over this, I've kind of tried to not get too much extraneous information, because I just want to experience the thing and do it. And that way, when I give back my responses, it's not like a Robin Williams where you're just like sucking in all this stuff and then just spinning it back out. But I would say she proven herself over and over as an MVP, and some of these supporting characters, the Melshis and the Vels and the Wilmons, they've all just done great. And you're surprised they're all still alive, but you're just like, yeah, so many characters. But I just really wish there was a couple more of those little connective tissues to really, just highlight, because you see that scene in Return of the Jedi, right? We just talked. It's like, it says a lot without saying a lot. And it's really great to get that, because now you can look back at that and you see there's so much that goes into, when she's talking about the Bothan spies and all that. And where's that book? But at any rate,
Rogue 2, it's a movie. Yes, I mean, co-sign everything you said. You're also reminding me, at Rhode Island Comic-Con like 2 years ago, I almost bought a signed Power of the Force figure that Caroline Blackistone had signed as Mom Mothma, and now you're filling me with regret. So I'm going to hit eBay before we drop this episode and see if I can find one. I'll do what Daz did and watch one and see if they offer me a little discount on it when the time comes. So I do completely agree with what all you say. I just want to take a little sidetrack for just a moment. I really get frustrated when Star Wars podcasters give voice to the most toxic parts of fandom. But there was some toxicity out there today about Senator Pamelo in particular. And lo and behold, it's the black woman that they suddenly have a huge problem with. So,
shocker.
So the problem is like how, there's lots of those memes about how everybody's on board for the rebellion, but, somebody can't, blah, 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 blah. And there were racist things that I'm not going to repeat, certainly. But let me just say this about those characters that are frustrating. Hey, dummies, they're supposed to be frustrating, right? That's called good storytelling. And this is going back to Last Jedi, where somebody's like, if a plot line doesn't make me feel good, it's dumb. No, sometimes storytellers want to frustrate you. And you know what's true of any social movement? You get the people who so frustratingly refuse to take action. And if they weren't there, this would feel unnatural. And I completely agree with how you just characterized those senators in Rogue One. It's like you're sitting there going like, listen to Jyn Erso. Like, just do it. Like, this is the truth. But it wouldn't be realistic if everybody just signed on to the new character's plan. So those characters play a vital role, and they make this more real. And get out of here with your racism. Get out of my freaking fandom. I'm tired of it. It's been 10 years of this BS, and I'm not going to put up with this anymore. Get out of here. You don't belong in this fandom, and you never were a real fan if you didn't embrace everybody. So, okay, I'll stop sweating, and I'll get there. So
no, but
hey,
you
Greg,
reminded me.
Yeah.
Admiral Radis is here. And you're like, yay, this is awesome.
Yay.
Anyway.
Absolutely. And apparently a totally rebuilt costume. I guess it hadn't aged well in the 10 years since Rogue One. So they built it from scratch, but you can't tell. And they get Stephen Stanton back, and Radis is awesome. Pamelo, Draven, Radis, the comms guy whose name I can't remember, who in Rogue One yells, Senator, Senator.
And they're like, whoa, slow your roll, pal.
Yeah, they got everybody, and it works so well. And you're also opening up a space for me to say, I forgot to mention last episode, there was a line Williman said about Yavin 4, and he said, like, it just feels like all anybody's doing here is just getting ready. And I love that as a metatextual joke, because that is all we ever see of
That's it.
Yavin is people like taking hoses off starships and getting ready to take off and so on. So that was really good, but they made Yavin feel like it is right out of Rogue One, which is right out of A New Hope. They got the little guys on the little troop transports, they got the pilots, they got the X-wings and the hoses. They did so well on that.
Mm-hmm.
So, Greg, my next question for you, if you take the end arc and then you throw in Rogue One as the series finale, the only people who survive this show are 5 women, right?
Mm.
You get Vel, you get Mon, you get Bix, that's a big one.
Mm-hmm.
You get Dedra, Miro survives as well, and you get Clea. So what do you
Ooh.
make of the fact that the 5 people who make it out of the rebellion are, and I don't know that there's an answer to this question. Let me just preface
Yeah, I was
your
gonna say.
response to it. But what do you think of the fact that it's just the 5 women who live this, and we lose Melshi, K2, and Cassian, of course, in Rogue One, if people are calling me out on that.
Mm. Oh, that's tough. I don't know if I can answer that. What I do find it's interesting to hear so many survivors after, I think my pat line with Rogue, why do you love Rogue One so much? And I'm like, I just loved that sacrifice felt like it meant something, right? And maybe it's interesting because it challenges myself to go, if they survived, did they really contribute? Because it's like, clearly if someone gave the last vestige in themselves, right? What was Lincoln's line? The last, measure of their, worth or whatever. Like, I'm butchering the line. I should go to Washington D.C. and read the wall of the Lincoln Monument for that. But it doesn't mean they did. I mean, they sacrificed a lot. But they weren't all not affected by it, right? I mean, clearly Dead was in prison. But I was kind of happy with where Bix ended up. And I was also like, I want her to be, we actually saw BMO happy. And I'm like, and sure, seeing that, and that was another one I was very happy of not knowing about the spoiler. But I would be incredibly happy if what would appear to be Cassian and Bix's child, simply was a farmer their whole life. I'm like, you don't got to do nothing. You don't got to pilot nothing. You don't got to all you need to do maybe is fight for, I don't know, a stronger letter opener or something like that. Or just, hey, better crop rotations. I don't know. I just want you to be happy. But I would say for me, Bix's end, was very satisfactory. I loved the Narkina flashback for Dedra. Clea and Vel, I think I had more of an issue with because I don't know if I really thought that Vel was just kind of there, but you're sort of expecting them once again. Expectations. I wasn't quite sure if her at the end, but I think with her and Mon having that moment together where they're kind of sitting at the table, I'm like, I like that. Clea, that in watching the scene again between her and Vel, I think she was kind of looking for a purpose. I think it kind of slowed down as they were doing this really long, drawn out. Like Cassian seemed to be walking like a mile to his rig. There was like, oh, there's so much more you could have put there, but I felt that maybe I wasn't quite sure. I wasn't quite sure at the end. Could she have been sacrificed, saving or like killing Luthen to save Luthen? I'm not sure her ending was as satisfactory, but it's really interesting now that you mention it. Like, yeah, you wouldn't have expected some of these folks to still be around, but on some levels it's satisfying, and others you kind of go, okay, I didn't call it, but hey, I don't mind being surprised in this. So in maybe dodging it, I don't know how I feel about it, but I would say there are some highs and lows. Bix very high, Clea very low, Dedra very high, and some in between. What about yourself? That is a tricky one. That's a great question.
Yeah, well, and I should shout out. I hadn't pieced that together till Tony Gilroy gave a kind of season wrap interview to The Watch, which I know I've plugged The Watch a lot this season. It's a really good show. It's a really good interview, just because he's free to talk about it all. And he pointed out, like, well, we end with these 5 women, and I was like, wow. And it actually took me a while to remember Dedra as one of the women, because it's kind of an ignoble end. Um, you know, I think it's a nice corrective to what became a trope for a long time, which is the dead wife, dead girlfriend that motivates the hero.
Hmm.
And the fact that it is the women who survive is really nice and kind of shows that the Force, Star Wars has a lot of daddy issues, right? And to show that there's life and there's goodness in that other side of the parenting couple is good as well. I'll completely agree with kind of your breakdown on those. I think you hit it right. I already said seeing Dedra on a Narkina just like sobbing was like, yes, that's what happens to fascists. It was so delicious. The only one I'll slightly push back on is I really liked Vel. And the moment we haven't mentioned is Vel's toast with Cassian. Like, will you drink to Luthen? And then he says, we can't go back and name them all. And Vel goes back and names Garn and the other guy I can't remember from Aldani and Nemec and on through. She keeps a tally. And I think that is a little bit of the thesis of this show. This show is about the names that you forget or the names that you never learn in your history book. And Vel is there as the one who remembers and will bring that forward. I've already seen somebody pitch, tell me the original trilogy through the eyes of Mon Mothma, Vel, and Clea. Like the three of them are working together. I'd read that book. That would be a lot of fun. I think there's a lot of real estate for what Mon Mothma is up to between Andor and Return of the Jedi, and that could be really good. Why isn't she at Hoth? Where is she? What's she working on? I think that could all be really interesting.
Yeah, and it'll also be a nice way to kind of revisit that. Like there's been so much redone, especially in the comics, of like in the new Marvel run of the adventures of Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, and Han Solo. That I think there would be fertile ground, and you have a lot of writers who are finishing up their High Republic responsibilities. So I'm like, you know what? There are a lot of, now that you have survivors and 5 really good ones. Boy, there's a nice little series arc that could go through, and I think I'd gobble them up in a heartbeat. I mean, like, yeah, we'll take your catalyst in times 5, and you go, okay, I'm good. And even let's talk about like even little Jyn Erso. I mean, like, man, there's a lot of.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say I'm sure they were off limits, and I think you're exactly right. That now that the main storyteller has finished, I think you could really open that up. We just got our first Acolyte novel last week, and it was great. It was a nice extension of some of those characters. So, completely agree with you. Sorry for interrupting you.
No. Good stuff. And yeah, it was interesting. Like I said, I was wondering. I think I spent a lot of time in the latter stages wondering how Wilman and Clea and Vel, how they were going to kind of pan out. And I was a little surprised, like I said, especially given the time that Wilman spent with Saw. And you thought, okay, well, here, it's like, if we're worried about how Wilman is doing, well, let's see, Saw is basically if you really want to short somebody's life, go hang out with Saw, because they don't necessarily spend it doing really safe stuff. As a matter of fact, it would have been super cool to have spent a little more time on Jedha, and I think there would have been some interesting ground there, and you wouldn't have even had to dance around Chirrut and Baze. You could have gone some other things, just like they kind of did with the Gold Squadron escort of Mon Mothma, where they didn't necessarily have to put in the Rebels, but they led right up to, and who didn't sit there and watch that episode of Rebels right after that, which was good. And in going back to Filoni, if you think about the difference in Mon's speech in Rebels, Mon's speech versus in Andor, you're going, yeah, I think even Filoni would have said, like, yeah, I suck, you are awesome, please rewrite anything I've ever written, and we're gonna go from there. Could Andor have been a movie instead of the TV series or multiple movies, would we have been just as well served?
Oh, how glad I am to have the question to get to give a strong, definitive answer. No, this is the first time a Star Wars show has really earned its runtime, and that is not something just Star Wars is guilty of. I listen, people who know me know I watch a lot of movies because I find TV frustrating. And because storytelling gets given an arbitrary number of episodes, they stretch it out and you're like, "Yeah, we really didn't need this many." So I am so happy to say, "No, this actually was a bona fide TV show." And I love Kenobi. Kenobi was a movie stretched into a TV show. This is a genuine TV show, and it was built like a TV show, and it made use of every single one of those moments. So, Greg, no, this should have been a TV show, and it was perfect as such. Thank you so much for the question.
No, that's fine. Yeah, it's so interesting, and like I said, it was over so quickly that you know, a lot of times I think when we go back over it and we revisit it, and it's great being a TV show because you can take it in pieces, whereas like if you're sitting down and going like, hey, maybe I'm just going to throw on Phantom Menace again, like, well, okay, that's 2 hours. So this is something where you can kind of go back and binge it and do it out of order and do it in pieces where there are these natural chunks. And you know, I don't think we will see the likes of this for a while. It will be interesting. It's what's really hard, and I don't think they mind the space in between, because if I was Ahsoka season 2, which is about the only live action that we've heard about, I would want a good hard distance between me and Andor, because I don't know how you follow this, you know, with anything else. I think Book of Boba Fett after this, you'd be like, oh my God, it's like sending it to the wolves. But I would say any show coming after, it's going to be really hard, because I think you saw such an A team in writing, and I love the fact you brought that up earlier with just that writing matters. And you know, when we've listened to, you know, Dan Zare, Coffee with Kenobi, talk about, you know, like when things work and things not work, when we're going like, this is awesome, it really matters. And I think you know, like you can totally use the volume, you can, you know, if to keep the costs down, but don't scrimp on, you know, on the writing, because I think that can really do wonders for you, and it can save you a lot of money, but it also can really make a great story. And I think it really solves almost everything. They can ILM themselves out of a lot of jams, but bad writing, it's so hard to save it.
Well, and you know, I think our listeners have heard me say this before. To me, that's why you pay for a creator and you have that creator execute their vision. Not everything great in this episode or in this series is the result of Tony Gilroy, but he was involved with it all. And for me, the other high point of Disney era Star Wars was Last Jedi, because they committed to a creator and they let him do his vision. I find that art by committee, art by focus group of what the people want, these secret little fan groups they have to give advice, it's all terrible, right? Let art challenge us, let art break our expectations, and let it be somebody's personal work. And, you know, it is incredible that in the year of our Lord 2025, in this country, in the state it's in, a major corporation paid to put on air a show that pointed out the tactics of fascists and the ways in which you resist them. I'm not somebody who's going to be like, I don't have the Mickey Mouse tattoo. I like to remember that Disney gives us a lot, but Disney is a major corporation that does not care about me personally. But this took courage, and especially in this environment, it took standing by your principles. And I am shocked we got this, and it's incredible. So, yeah, I completely agree with you. I will close us out then with the unanswerable question that is pure headcanon, Greg. So you get to be the Tony Gilroy to close out the conversation. Greg, there is a baby at the end of this show. I want you to name the baby in your headcanon, which means you get to pick the gender as well. So I will say there was a little video bopping around. Adria Arjona explained that she had a name for the baby and she knew what she wanted to call the baby. But Tony Gilroy said definitively that character has not been named. It does not have an identity. So if they agreed on one, it's headcanon and it doesn't count. I don't think that that baby is about to be like, special editioned into Force Awakens. Like, hi, I'm blank Andor here to save the rebellion. I actually think it's more beautiful. It's actually the Luthen speech. If, I sacrifice my soul for a future I will never see. Cassian doesn't get to see that, but if that baby lives its whole life happy as a farmer, that's a win for Cassian. But Greg, name the baby and tell us what gender it is.
I came to this a lot quicker than I thought it would, but I think if I put myself in those same shoes, and if it was a boy, I think I would have named it Brasso. To see your best friend go down like that and to hold them, and has someone who has lost a good friend like that, who I think about a lot. I think it'd be a clear winner, Brasso.
Really? Over Tim?
Over Tim, yes. This is
Sorry,
no disparaging
you made a beautiful
to
point,
Tim
and
out
I
there.
made a dumb joke.
No.
So.
Tim has it. I think it'd be interesting. I always thought about like if I'd had a third child, if I'd had another son, because there's a lot of William McLaughlins in my family, including my grandfather and my uncle, and many before. And I think that if I'd had a third, it would have gotten named William, because it's just like, well, this is what our family does. But I think there is that lineage to it, and I do think that, I think I would have named it if it was a boy, Brasso. I think it'd be interesting if the gender was a girl. I think there is some choices, although I think I could see him naming it after his sister because he just never found her.
Her naming it after his sister, because he doesn't get a vote, right?
That's true.
But yes,
That's true.
could be.
It's certainly not going to be named after her ex-boyfriend who turned in Cassian. Certainly not. No,
Yeah.
no.
Well, you had my male answer because I thought of this in advance.
That's a great question.
If it's a baby girl, I got one answer, and that's Marva. Right?
Yeah, that's what I was going.
And I long and hard thought about naming my daughter Eleanor after my grandmother. We went with Ada eventually, but passed down Elizabeth as her middle name, which is passed through that part of my family. But I think baby Marva on Bix's shoulder would also work. Either one would make me cry. It made me cry without a name and gender, but really, really beautiful ending. I was scared we'd never know about Bix. I love, again, I don't need that baby to go save the resistance in 30 years. I want to know they were happy. The little description came out about B2 EMO's friend, and it was like, Aggie is an old droid who likes to play with his new best friend, B2 Emo.
Oh, you're breaking
and it's
my
like,
heart.
yep,
It's so good.
that's all I want from any of them. Like, they just got to live the quiet life. They got to be small in a galaxy where we know all the big people.
Yeah, and with so much that had happened to Bix, that was, for me, I'm like, you don't need to do any more rebelling. You just enjoy your life, go play in the wheat fields, and just enjoy the farmer's market, and there you go. Have an extra piece of jam, space jam, and just live your best life, and BMO, just make sure that droid gets charged. And that was just like I said, out of all those little vignettes at the end, I think that was probably one of my favorites. And you go, that is, because you like that. You like seeing the Mandalorian out there. You're like on the porch watching Grogu kind of play with the frogs, and you're going, that's, in some cases, there's been so much sadness and characters we love and things like that going that you go, no, it's fine. Every now and then, like what did Christopher Eccleston say in one of those Ninth Doctor episodes? Like, today nobody dies. Like everybody lives today, and I'm like, I don't mind that every now and then.
Nice, good call.
Because at any rate, all right, are we about ready for some Pringles cans reviews?
I'm ready, man.
All right.
I was going to introduce it, but you promised you had a new introduction, so I'm being quiet.
So in talking a little bit before with a good friend of mine, and we were kind of decide, because, like I said, 2 of these episodes for me are standouts, and they really continued on, and I thought it was going to be very hard because I was very high on the last arc. I listed it as a 9, and I thought, sometimes, those last shows can be a little bit of a letdown because it's like you've been put through so much. But I would say I would give it more of an 8.5, and I would say the only reason it's not a 9, I think the last one lets it down a little bit. But when we kind of talked about it, it's almost like, as much as it would be like in Pringles, like if I had ordered barbecued flavored Pringles and I got sour cream and onion, I'd be like, all right, they're still Pringles, still good. Not exactly the flavor I was kind of looking for, but I ate them anyway. And I thought that's how I kind of feel about it. I'm like, I still got my Pringles. They still taste like I expect. I don't mind a sour cream and onion, but I was kind of hoping for a little barbecue. And I'm like, I'm okay with that. And I'll kind of leave it at that. But it was still a very satisfying series. And I think when we go back over these individually, then it'll be fun to kind of take them a little more and go deeper. How about you?
Interesting point. Unfortunately, incorrect. You have
I
been
have not
striking
done well
out
this
all
season.
week. This was a 27 out of 10 Pringle
Whoa.
cans. Look, I do actually, my hyperbole aside, I do want to at some point unpack these one by one. I just am living on the afterglow of that final episodes montage, right? So very few times in my life I have sat down to a fantastic meal, like just everything is exquisite, and you get the cocktail and you get the appetizer and you get the entree you want and you throw in for the dessert. Very few times in my life have I managed to stop eating at the right moment, right? There's just that moment where like I could be happy and satisfied, but I'm gonna cram that little bit extra in that makes you a little sick and makes you a little unhappy. To me, this final arc could have been the one extra dessert too much, and it understood what I needed better than what I did, and it just slowed me down a little bit, and it just took its time. And I managed to stop eating Andor at the moment where I feel satisfied, I feel content, I feel incredibly lucky. I already saw a meme online. Somebody joked, humanity's been around for, umpteen millions of years, and you managed to be alive at the same time as Andor. And I honestly feel that way. Like, this was so special to me. And, we were joking about Revenge of the Sith being that moment when we thought Star Wars was done. Star Wars is not done, but I suspect I've seen the best Star Wars of my lifetime, and I don't say that lightly as somebody looking to get internet clicks. I don't think we'll ever hit this high again, and it so was in my wheelhouse that I will enjoy whatever comes in the future, but I really feel like this was peak for me, and I never would have guessed that from the moment this series was introduced. So it has been an absolute pleasure to unpack all of these episodes with you, and I will not hesitate to get a crack at second breakfast because, the fact that we just recorded an hour and a half and didn't even really talk about Clea, like, blowing her way through the hospital. We didn't mention the old alien, which was absolutely a highlight when she's humming and kicking her little feet. I loved every minute of that. There's so much more to talk about with each of these episodes. I think, listeners, we've tried to do our due diligence, but we have to be kind of general. And I promise you, on threat of my own safety, I will come back and unpack every minute detail with you because there's so much to talk about in these. But Greg, an honest to goodness pleasure. I always know you'll call when a new show comes on, but there's that moment where I worry that you won't. But it was a pleasure doing another series on this series with you.
No, I appreciate that, and everybody out there who has been given like a lot of comments and being very supportive on this, because this was I know Tony was like, oh, that's gonna be bad for podcasters, and yeah, it kind of was. But what I would say is that, yes, I think we did. This is another one of the watershed moments in the Star Wars franchise, as we are getting, we're within, not too far away from getting to the 50th anniversary of A New Hope and the beginning of what has been an incredible ride. But I do think that we are at a moment when we start thinking about, things like, in 1983 or 1993 or 95 or 99, these moments, 2005, all these moments, and you're like, yeah, I think this was a moment where we probably saw the best of what Disney Plus can give us. And I can quibble as far as like, did they, on some of the execution, but I would say that this was so well done and it was so much of a pleasure. And, I can kind of see, like I said, when we kind of look at the numbers and when I hear and when I see it, there was a lot of call for Andor. And what I would hope, going forward is that, I understand that this you need to make money to get these things. I think that there is a bar that was set by the type of show. I would hope that they would not release it this way ever again. I do not. One of the things that I think has been missing, I didn't get a chance to say this, I'm glad I remembered, is that everybody kind of saw it at their own pace. And a lot of our friends staggered it out more, like just like normal people, like, all right, and so I think we lost a bit of the group experience that we normally had seen. And I love that when every week, and and you had a chance, like, oh, it's only 45 minutes, great, and then that week of talking, and we were kind of looking forward to 3 months of this, and we got it more abbreviated, and I so much more enjoy it when it's a group experience, like even putting Revenge of the Sith back in theaters just for that 1 week. But everybody kind of get it, most people got a chance to see it, and it was fun to see it. I like Star Wars as a group experience, and there is a way to do it on television. I get what they were trying to do. I don't quite agree with it, but then I don't think they're getting me on the phone. Don't worry, folks. They're not quizzing me, but I do think that it says something for, let's get this in a group experience. We don't need to throw out 2 or 3 shows the first go. It's okay. Slow your roll. Enjoy it. I think you will get more from it. And who knows? There's going to be creators out there that if this train keeps going, they're going to figure this out. They're going to figure out the way that it can best serve. Like, we're going to put this in a theater. We're going to put this on TV. We're going to put this in a book, comic, all this, and they're going to start working. And hopefully they have enough that they can work with, that they can please us for years to come. And my biggest hope is that it outgrows us. It outlives us, but continues to just be the stuff that enlightens and just gets kids that are just being born out to go, man, that's my favorite, and I can't wait to dive into it. Let's see what's happening next. I don't want it to end here.
Amen.
All right.
And to that end, and again, I don't work for the Disney Corporation. Tell people to watch this, right? Like I said, I was at an in-law lunch today, and I was like, this is not a Star Wars nerd thing. This is an everybody thing, and get people to watch it. We bang the drum over on my Wheel of Time show a lot because the ratings on that television show aren't that good. Andor is solid, but Acolyte is still outperforming it most weeks. So get it there. And I also wanted to shout out to your point about the group experience. PT over at Long Take Review pointed out to me, Rogue One should have been in the theaters this weekend, right?
Oh, yes.
They should have thrown it. I think it's the #1 movie on Disney Plus right now. Like, everybody would have gone to see that movie. It's been around. I think I've seen it in the theater 3 or 4 times since it initially came out, but so it's not like it's a rare experience, but people would have thrown down their $20 to go see that this weekend after the high of Andor.
Oh, yeah. And, it's curious, like, how much would it cost to get it in their theaters? But I'm like, do you think theaters would have, like, chased away money? I don't think so. I think you could put it back in the theaters, throw something back there once a year, especially if you're thinking about May the 4th. Get something back in theaters, like you can give us, and now we get a chance to not only revisit Andor, but talk about all the other stuff that they decided to throw out all together. I'm like, guys, just let us enjoy it. Let us enjoy it as a group, and give the Gilroys and everybody working on that show their flowers. Get them in the cons. Get them signing autographs. They deserve it. And yeah, just enjoy. And once again, thanks everybody for listening to this. In addition to the Wheel of Time podcast. Yeah, I was trying to make sure I didn't screw that up. Where else can you be found?
People can find me on Long Take Review. Since the last time we recorded this program, we have not recorded any new Long Take Reviews. So the last couple You can hear us talk about Revenge of the Sith. You can hear us talk about Conclave in light of the new Real World Conclave. And you should be able to very shortly hear us talk about Thunderbolts, which if people skipped Thunderbolts is an awesome Marvel movie.
Not had a
and
chance to.
it has a different title, right? I'm not going to say it because I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but Marvel's not hiding it anymore. So if you paid attention to the original marketing, it was Thunderbolts with an asterisk, and they've now revealed what that asterisk is and what it means and what the real title of the movie is. Go discover that for yourself, Marvel fans, and then come check it out on us on Long Take Review. Colby, I saw just got to Thunderbolts tonight, so I'm looking forward to seeing Colby Cast taking on too. It's a fun time. All right, I won't say anything else.
Yeah, I've got some time coming up that I don't have to ingest so many hours of Andor each week. So that'll be fun. I'm glad it's out there, and I'm actually glad it seems like it's doing so well. If you have questions for the Breakfast Pack, or if you have comments on this last arc, obviously we didn't get to everything we're going to be talking about again, but what were some burning things that you want to talk about, or you have questions you ask, and when we come back, we'd like to get a chance to answer them. You can find Rebel Base Card on the socials, Twitter, X, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, and Blue Sky at Rebel Base Card, and you can always email the show, greg@rebelbasecard.com. All right, and hey, we got some pretty cool designs in the T Public store, although we need a Breakfast Pack shirt. I think that's going to be maybe my summer project, is to come up with a proper Breakfast Pack logo. So that way my co-host...
Breakfast Pack, we have friends everywhere.
Oh.
Right to itself.
By the way, I did buy that shirt. Thank you, Ross. And I made sure I got it in the right size for me. Yes, rocking some tees, because what a great line that is. And I love the fact that, wait a minute. If I go to that, why don't I do my job here? And who was that? Maker was, good Lord, our thread is amazing. Let's see. I didn't even put it out there. Who was that? Was that Chew? What is it?
It was Chewbacca something.
Where is that at? Oh,
Chewbacca Creates. Yep.
ChewbaccaCreates.com on Etsy has some really gnarly t-shirt designs. Yeah, forget mine. Go buy hers, because it's much better. I figured, like, Frank's gonna buy the tech one right away, but there were some other ones. I'm going, man, this could be an expensive one. But yeah, I did order the I Have Friends Everywhere. Can't wait. And also, it's funny as we kind of wrap up, and I saw, being at Downtown Disney yesterday, I did a crazy one-day trip. My wife works for an airline, so I'm able to fly standby. But I got to go by the table where we had dinner with Dan Z and Mary and Colby and Tom and all those folks during Celebration Anaheim, and I took a selfie of myself in front of those tables, just thinking, like, man, it was so great when we all got together that one time, and I can't wait when Celebration comes back, or if other, that we all get a chance to get together again, because that was something special.
It's coming.
Just like this show, just like the Breakfast Pack, just like the community that we are in. So I want to say thank you to everybody for listening. All right, but I got to get people out of here and start the week. So for Greg Cass and myself, we're going to return you to your podcast playlist, already in progress.
Who do you think it is?
I'm afraid they're waiting for you, sir. I told them I'd bring you down.
May I have a moment to collect my thoughts?
This podcast is not affiliated in any way with Topps, Disney, or Star Wars, nor is it endorsed by Disney or Lucasfilm, and is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. All names and sounds and any other related items are properties of their respective trademarks and or copyright holders here in the U.S. and abroad. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com.
That's it.